Hello and welcome to the single subject versus group debate. Single subject research is similar to group research, especially experimental group research, in many ways. They're both quantitative approaches that try to establish causal relationships by manipulating an independent variable, measuring a dependent variable, and controlling extraneous variables. But there are important differences between these approaches too, and these differences sometimes lead to disagreements. One set of disagreement revolves around data analysis. Some advocates of group research worry that visual inspection is inadequate for deciding whether or to what extent a treatment has affected a dependent variable. One specific concern is that visual inspection is not sensitive enough to detect weak effects. A second is that visual inspection can be unreliable, with different researchers reaching different conclusions about the same set of data. A third is that the results of visual inspection, an overall judgment of whether or not a treatment was effective, cannot be clearly and efficiently summarized or compared across studies, unlike measures of relationship strength typically used in group research. In general, single-subject researchers share these concerns. However, they also argue that their use of the steady-state strategy, combined with their focus on strong and consistent effects, minimizes most of them. If the effect of a treatment is difficult to detect by visual inspection because the effect is weak or the data are noisy, then single-subject researchers look for ways to increase the strength of the effect or reduce the noise in the data by controlling extraneous variables, for example, by administering the treatment more consistently. If the effect is still difficult to detect, then they are likely to consider it neither strong enough nor consistent enough to be of further interest. Many single-subject researchers also point out that statistical analysis was becoming increasingly common, and that many of them are using it as supplement to visual inspection, especially for the purpose of comparing results across studies. External validity. The second issue, about which single-subject and group researchers sometimes disagree, has to do with external validity, or the ability to generalize the results of a study beyond the people and situation actually studied. In particular, advocates of group research point out the difficulty in knowing whether results for just a few participants are likely to generalize to others in the population. Again, single-subject researchers share this concern. In response, they note that the strong and consistent effects that they are typically interested in, even when observed in small samples, are likely to generalize to others in the population. Single-subject researchers also note that they place a strong emphasis on replicating their research results. When they observe an effect with a small sample of participants, they typically try to replicate it with another small sample, perhaps with slightly different type of participant or under slightly different conditions. Another point that single-subject researchers make is that group researchers also face a similar problem when they study a single situation and then generalize their results to other situations. For example, researchers who conduct a study on the effect of cell phone use on drivers on a closed oval track probably want to apply their results to drivers in many other real-world driving situations. But notice that this requires generalizing from a single situation to a population of situations. Thus, the ability to generalize is based on much more than just the sheer number of participants one has studied. It requires a careful consideration of the similarity of the participants and situations studied on the population of participants and situations that one wants to generalize to. Single subject and group research as complementary methods. As with quantitative and qualitative research, it is probably best to conceptualize single-subject research and group research as complementary methods that have different strengths and weaknesses and that are appropriate for answering different kinds of research questions. Single-subject research is particularly good for testing the effectiveness of treatments on individuals when the focus is on strong, consistent, and biologically or socially important effects. It is especially useful when the behavior of particular individuals is of interest. Clinicians who work with only one individual at a time may find that it is their only option for doing systematic quantitative research. Group research, on the other hand, is good for testing the effectiveness of treatments at the group level. Among the advantages of this approach is that it allows researchers to detect weak effects, which can be of interest for many reasons. For example, finding a weak treatment effect might lead to refinement of the treatment that eventually produces a larger and more meaningful effect. Group research is also good for studying interactions between treatments and participant characteristics. For example, if a treatment is effective for those who are high in motivation to change and ineffective for those who are low in motivation to change, then a group design can detect this much more efficiently than a single subject design. Group research is also necessary to answer questions that cannot be addressed using a single subject approach, including questions about independent variables that cannot be manipulated. For example, number of siblings, extroversion, culture, etc. Finally, it is important to understand that the single subject and group approaches represent different research traditions. Researchers in the experimental analysis of behavior and applied behavior analysis learn to conceptualize their research questions in ways that are amenable to the single subject approach. One example is research suggesting that both animals and humans have an innate number sense, or an awareness of how many objects or events of a particular type have they had experienced without actually having to count them. Single-subject research with rats and birds and group research with human infants have shown strikingly similar abilities in those populations to discriminate small numbers of objects and events. This number sense, which has probably evolved long before humans did, may even be the foundations of humans' advanced mathematical abilities.